mornings on the Mall. Weekdays 5 till 9 on Washington's Mall. WMAL, where Washington comes to talk.
All right, welcome back, folks. I'm Dan Bongino, here till 7 p, talking all things Syria. Busy news weekend. Just working out this morning. Hey, get in there. We got some breaking news. I didn't speed, I promise. I obeyed the speed limit at all times. Again, I'm Dan Bongino with you till 7 p. We're talking Syria, 888-630-9625. We've had some terrific guests. We had Eli Lake, we had Chris Plant, Bill Kristol, we have KT McFarland coming up. But right now, we have Major General Bob Scales. General, thank you for coming on, sir. Again, I know you're in high demand this weekend.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate the call.
You're very welcome. Do you have the bat phone next to you waiting for all of these calls when situations like this break?
This is the darndest thing. If someone would have asked me prior to the president, or told me prior to the president's speech that he was going to ask permission from Congress to do this, I would have called him a fool. Well, guess what?
I'll tell you, I'm with you. I was stunned. I mean, I was listening to the speech literally on the way in, and remember, he didn't say that until the end of the speech, and I'm thinking,
that's what's amazing. I
almost choked on I was eating a pretzel at the time. I almost choked on the pretzel. So I'm stunned by this. I think a lot of this is politics, and I asked Bill Kristol, Eli Lake, and I'll ask you as well, with the public fatiguing quickly of international military engagements. I don't think anybody's questioning that right now. And Congress not in session, back in their districts, hearing it from the constituents. Now that the president's punted, what happens?
Well, honestly, in the long term, I think not much. First of all, I can't imagine Congress authorizing this after all we've been through. And secondly, any strike that Charles Schottheimer called a pinprick, after 9 more days of playing, hide the rocket launchers, I think that it'll be probably less than a pinprick if it does go down. And I think whether it goes down or it doesn't go down, I think right now the United States looks kind of foolish.
Well, we're talking to Major General Bob Scales, retired U.S. Army Major General and Fox News military analyst. General, no better person to answer this question than you, given your incredible resume. I'm actually taking a look at it now. It goes on and on. We had to print up 2 pieces of paper. I'm very impressed. So, but Martin Dempsey, apparently, General Dempsey had told the president, as he said in his speech, that this this operation wouldn't be time sensitive. Now, I was not a military major general like yourself, but having been a Secret Service agent for well over a decade, involved in many international operations in coordination with DOD. Everything in the security or combat operations front is time sensitive, is it not? That seems to me like
of course.
A little bit of a political statement.
What's the most precious commodity in warfare? I'll give you a little War College 101. It's time.
Right.
And time and the side that makes the most of time is the side that usually wins. And remember now, what we're missing in this analysis is that the enemy has a vote. And when you give the Syrian army the gift of 10 days, I would suspect they're going to use it. I've heard media reports here in Fox News that the Syrian army has already started shelling in Damascus again. I mean, they're not waiting for anyone to turn them back. They're back to killing their own people. So if the purpose of a cruise missile strike is to strike static fixed targets, and if those targets have to be identified by overhead surveillance, then there's a dwell time, a sort of flash to bang time between target location and the settings, the computer settings on a missile, and that oftentimes stretches into hours. Well, if you add that to a figure of something like 9 or 10 days, then the Syrians are playing a game of chess, moving pieces around the board, hiding them here and there, and our poor targeteers are trying to catch up with this. And as I said, when time is on the enemy's side, sure, a strike we deliver in 10 days will be as explosive as a strike that we deliver tomorrow. But when you give the enemy 10 days, right, the enemy reacts.
We're talking to Major General Bob Scales, who was gracious enough to join us today, retired U.S. Army Major General and Fox News military analyst. General, we're talking about the time-sensitive nature of this, contrary to the president's statements that it wasn't time-sensitive. And it makes me think of the Israeli strike in Syria, taking out their nuclear reactor. We've given up so much information in advance, and now the president's made a publicly, I think, ridiculous statement that it's not time-sensitive. I mean, shouldn't he take a lesson from the Israelis that If you're going to do it, then do it or don't do it. But don't broadcast the entire operation to the entire world on the 24-hour news cycles. This is absurd.
Yeah, I think the word that I've heard thrown about here is amateur hour. And I know that my friends in the Pentagon are just writhing in pain over this. They're embarrassed. They are running for the they're running for the shadows, trying to get away from this. And I know that many of my friends on active duty are tortured by this whole. It's not just this decision,
right,
Dan. It's the whole decision-making process over the last 2 or 3 weeks that I find so clunky and amateurish. Good grief! If you're going to go to war, go to war. If you're going to go to war, then try to achieve some strategic object that plays to the national interests of the United States. Don't just thump the enemy for revenge or for retaliation or retribution or whatever word you want to use. If you go to war, you go to war for victory, not just for effect.
I could not agree more. We're talking to Major General Bob Scales, retired U.S. Army Major General. Sir, of the three options, we had Bill Kristol on before, and we kind of narrowed it down to doing nothing. And when I say nothing, we don't mean nothing in the sense of zero or the lack of value.
Right.
We mean nothing openly. Intelligence operations, maybe some joint training, some sharing of information, maybe some support of our friends in the region behind the scenes. So that would be number one, the nothing with air quotes. The second option being this slap on the wrist, the old Bill Clinton cruise missile lob into town, which really does absolutely nothing, in my opinion. And the third option being Mr. Kristol seemed to support what he called strong and decisive action, but no boots on the ground. I can tell you where I stand. I stand right now with the let's not do anything option until we're absolutely sure. Let's maybe buttress our friends overseas and work on some intel operations. Where do you stand on this? I mean, I don't see the third option being any good.
Yeah, okay, let me give you a fourth. Here's a statistic for you.
Okay.
It takes about 2,000 tons of material a day to sustain an Army light division in heavy combat. We've probably given the Syrian resistance less than 100 tons of material over the last 2 years. If you want this to go right, then we need to start funneling material, trainers. We need to establish training camps in Jordan like we've done in other countries. We need to load these guys up with anti-tank and anti-aircraft guided missiles. We need to give them hundreds of tons of ammunition. We need to perhaps give them mortars and artillery. There are all sorts of things that we can do to make the resistance a credible fighting force and let them do the fighting for us. But if I were a rebel sitting on the border with Jordan right now, listening to the radio or watching television, and I heard that the President of the United States says, well, no, I don't think we're going to do this right now, that actually wouldn't work to give me confidence that sticking with the rebellion is in my family's best interest. And so the second and third order effects of all this is going to depress the resistance, embolden the Syrian army, and make our friends and neighbors in the region, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and even Israel, think twice about supporting us when we push our agendas in the region.
We're talking to Major General Bob Scales, retired U.S. Army Major General. Sir, I got one more question for you. We'll let you go again. I know you're busy here. But do we run the risk, if we were to take that fourth option of supplying heavily the rebel force, do we run a risk of another Afghanistan-type proxy war with the Russians supplying anti-ship and, surface-to-air missiles allegedly to the Syrian government? Do we run that risk again of what's a cold behind-the-scenes war becoming an open proxy war?
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, if you cut away the BS in the media,
right,
we're sort of in a proxy war with the Russians right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't think there'd be greater risk of a proxy war if you have 2, 3, 4 Russian ships in 10 days cruising around the eastern Mediterranean, while 4 or 5 of our ships launch cruise missiles against their allies in Syria. This has been a proxy war between Russia, Iran, to some extent China, for 2.5 years. My view is if you want to win, you side with the side who's on your side. And I think we've just failed to do that, at least to the extent that we could, and I don't understand why we haven't.
Well, sir, thank you so much for your time. We're talking to Major General Bob Scales. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy. That was an incredible perspective. I was sitting here taking notes as you were talking. There's so many questions. I could have kept you on for another 2 hours, but thanks for your time, and keep that bat phone right next to you. You're going to be in high demand this weekend.
Okay, Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. That was Major General Bob Scales. Incredible perspective, folks. We've had some great guests for